It's Zach Edey with Purdue men's basketball, and you're watching Boilers in the Stands.
Welcome back to Boilers in the Stands. I'm your host, Joe Jackson. Joining me, as always, is my co-host, Craig Bowers. Purdue, on this Thanksgiving Day, gets a win, 71-61. Hope everybody out there is having a good Thanksgiving, enjoying some food, enjoying time with family, potentially. So we'll go through this game. A lot to talk about. Right off rip, I think this is, at least that second half was Purdue's best half of the season, in my eyes, just the way that they kind of controlled for most of that half. Lot to get into. Obviously, another quick turnaround with Purdue playing another game tomorrow, play the winner of BYU and Ole Miss, which is currently going on. But important win. Purdue gets this one. Now they're going to get the winner of the game tomorrow. Craig, I'll throw it to you first. You were there, you are there in person. What'd you see? What'd you like? Wow. What was kind of just the vibes overall of being there in person?
Well, I think first of all, Purdue fans need a shout out again, just like last year. They definitely traveled. Say probably 3/4 of that arena was full of Purdue fans, just like all year last year, just dominated that and showed out. Now it's only a 3,000 person arena, so not quite as big as a crowd as some of those the previous year, but nonetheless, they're here in force once again. I think from a game standpoint, for me, what really stood out is some of the things that we've questioned about Purdue all year. I thought this was their best game in some of those areas, talking about rebounding, talking about free throw shooting percentage, talking about defense, just in terms of perimeter pressure, what they did in the second half on that end. So I think that's a highlight for me, Joe, is just some of those question mark areas that we've had all season. I thought this was probably their best game in several of those areas.
Yeah, and this was to me was the best game that we've seen so far of TKR at the 5. Like flat out, this was the first game all season where, and I know we've only seen it in what, 3 or 4 games now. This was the first game where it was like, this is absolutely the best lineup in this game. TKR has 22 points, 8 rebounds. Lawyer Smith do their thing. Heide, big time game, 15 points. And then Jakari off the bench, one of the better players for Purdue in this game. It just felt like the spacing that they were able to create and still being able to rebound the ball well, even with TKR at the 5. If those two things happen, like if you can rebound the ball well, also if you can somewhat protect the rim, which I don't think it was like elite, but I don't think it was the worst ever either. That's when this lineup can really start playing a lot more minutes together. And that's when you start to see outputs like that second half where it, like Purdue, maybe there was a minute or two stretch, but for the most part, really, really felt like they dominated that second half to me. Of like, it was never, after the first minute or two, it was never really like, I was never really too worried about Purdue losing that game, I should say, is how I'll phrase it. So big shout out to the TKR at the 5 lineup. I know we've been wanting to see it and see it to be better. And this was finally the game that we were able to do it. Before we get into the next thing, if you are watching, please like, subscribe, turn on the bell notifications. We'll go again live tomorrow after the game. Craig will be doing pressers. He just did the pressers, I believe. And so he'll have those up on our YouTube channel.
If we can call them pressers here, the pressers here was just find the coach and the players in the hallways outside of the locker rooms and ask a few questions, but grateful that they gave us time with them, but not like a real press room type of situation like you're used to seeing it at Purdue or some of the other tournaments that they go to. But still got to talk to him. I'll have those videos up a little bit after the show's done. Some good stuff in there from Painter and from some of the players too. Also, don't forget about that super chat button if you guys want to. That's one way. A lot of times people ask us how they can support us. If you hit that super chat button and donate something, if you want to do that, that automatically gets your comment read, and we certainly appreciate any support we get.
Yep. So let's dive into it now, get into a little bit more of the details. Do we want to just start off rip with players, or do you want to start? Is there some overall general things you want to hit first?
I think there's some overall general things. So, I mean, rebounding was just huge point of emphasis in this game, right? So they end up, I think, plus 13 overall and plus 6 on offensive boards. There were a couple of different series where they got multiple offensive rebounds that ended up leading to second chance points. At the same time, I think obviously turnovers, right? We said turnovers had to be limited. We forced turnovers from them. We were, positive in that turnover margin in terms of, I think we ended up with 6 and they ended up with 8, if I remember right. Is that right, Joe?
6 for Purdue and 8 for NC State. You were spot on.
Yeah, man, just off the top of my head. But I think those two things are huge. We always going to talk about keeping turnovers limited when we come in, and then when you can get second opportunities, it's more possessions, right? It's possessions you're not giving away, and it's secondary possessions that you weren't expected to get. And when Purdue wins both of those areas, I don't think there's going to be a lot of times they lose.
Yeah, and rebounding is big. It's going to be like when we do our preview shows. It's one of those and turnovers are just going to be the, what are the key points? Rebounding and turnovers. Like those are going to be the 2 key points for every single game. It almost feels like you don't even have to say it at this point. It was important that they were able to attack the glass. They had 13 offensive rebounds, because this was like purely shooting the ball. This was not a good Purdue night. They were not efficient. Nope. Really, like 42% overall, 31% from 3. They shot very well from the free throw line and got there a lot. 13 offensive rebounds, though. That is 13 offensive rebounds. Almost quick math, probably like 40% of their misses ish. That second half, and I understand stylistically it's a bit different, and there's a lot more. There's even more pick and roll this year. That second half to me felt like the closest we've seen to last year's Purdue team, of just like get to the line a lot, dominate the glass a bit. Obviously, you'd still think the shooting should be a bit better, but just that physicality, that energy, and that, like, it was the first half, especially in a non-bye game, that it felt like to me Purdue really, really controlled. Even that Bama game was right. It was close, and then CJ Cox went nuclear for 2 minutes, and then Purdue just kind of kept the lead. It was good to see, and I don't have last year's expectations for this team or anything like that, but it was good to see them get back to that. One thing for me that just really stood out within this game is it felt like Purdue changed the way they defended pick and rolls a bit, especially those side pick and rolls. And so what I mean by that, and I wish I had my board, that's on me for not having it for this, but Purdue plays their drop coverage, right? Where TKR is going to be below the screen when defending pick and rolls, and he's going to let the ball handler try to get to a mid-range shot. When those are on the wing, right, and not at the top of the key, when they are on the wing, Purdue oftentimes has still allowed the ball handler to go to the middle, and that I feel like has put Purdue in a lot of rotations. Today it's called icing, and so what they did is you see the guard flip, and they force the ball handler sideline into where TKR is in drop coverage, and in theory that should eliminate a lot of the rotation, because now, right, you're not driving middle where somebody low man probably has to rotate to help on the roller as TKR has to step up a bit more. You're already forcing him into TKR. Now you don't have to provide as much help. It helps. NC State's not a great shooting team. I don't know actually what they shot from 3 in this game. I know 4 of 17. So that helps, but it just felt like Purdue, I liked the switch of trying it with this Purdue defense, right? I don't think we're going to call it an elite defense, but if they can do things like that schematically to try to make it a little bit easier to stay out of rotation, that feels really big to me, because now then Purdue can stay home at shooters a bit more. Purdue can, in theory, protect the rim a bit more. And so, obviously, like you said, rebounds, turnovers, big, but that was the next biggest thing just from a stylistic overall standpoint that stood out to me. And it felt like it really helped.
And it's something that they did a lot at one point in time, because I remember we had a show with Raphael Davis on, and we were just talking about icing, exactly what it was and how that all works and when they do it and when they don't do it. But, in some of the film of the North Carolina State that we watched leading into this, we talked about one thing that they did do fairly decently well was get into the paint and hit some mid-range jumpers. And I think that really limited them in that standpoint, just how they chose to play defense on it. The other thing that I would say is I thought Jakari, I know we're going to get into individual player stuff, right, in a little bit, but I thought this was the first game all year where Purdue really looked like they had a secondary ball handler that was also high level, because I thought Jakari was great in terms of getting downhill, getting into the paint, finding some guys, trying to score himself at the rim a couple of times. And over the last 2 games, it's just felt like he's become more comfortable about knowing when to go ahead and attack and when not to. And if he just keeps developing, right, just keep learning, keep getting more comfortable, keep developing, that's going to be huge for Braden and for the team at large.
And I'm with you. And we're gonna talk about Jakari more in a bit, so I won't go too in depth. But he wasn't the best player for Purdue today, just because TKR and Heide I think were so good. But he might have been the third best. I don't third or fourth best. Like, he was very good. I'm curious how much is like, because he has looked good these past 2 games. How much is it him coming off the bench? How much is it he is now in game 7 of his freshman season and not game 1 and 2? I think all of those factors can kind of coexist together. His ability to get downhill. I've talked about it with this Purdue team. There's still things to work on for sure, but he's looking comfortable. Now the shot has to develop. He's a better shooter than what he's shooting right now. Like I maybe he's not this elite shooter, maybe like I was hoping coming in from high school, but just based on all of high school numbers and stuff, he's a better shooter than what he is right now. If that can get to 33, 35%, where teams have to really respect it, that even opens up the driving lanes a bit more. And he also had, I don't know how many assists, 3 assists. Like, that kind of checks out too. With he was able to get downhill, but he also created for others too off of it. And so that was really big from him. Was there anything else, just big picture, stylistically, anything like that really stood out?
No, I think we can roll. Oh, okay. Go ahead, and then we can roll
Very
into
simple.
the players.
We've kind of hit on it throughout this. Is that first half, it felt like NC State had a bit more energy to me than Purdue. I think it was close. Purdue was the more aggressive team. They had way more energy in the second half. And so, as much as I love to talk about X's and O's and deep dives and all that, like, sometimes it is as simple as, do you have more energy? Are you willing to work harder than the other team? Purdue did that in the second half, and then now we see the results. So we can get into some of the players now. I'll throw up the stats here. There's no chance I'm able to read that on my screen, given how small it is. But TKR, 22 points, 8 rebounds, 2 assists, 2 turnovers in 30 minutes, 8 of 14 from the field, 6 of 10 from the free throw line. Feel like we have to start with him, right? It's kind of the TKR, not TKR coming out party per se, because he's done this. But this was definitely a, hey, TKR, you have to be the best player on the floor.
Yeah, without a doubt. And, once again, and we kind of keep talking about this in regards to him, but, a big second half after a first half that, I mean, he did some really nice things there, and he had a couple of stretches, but he had 7 points at the end of the first half. And then I think, was it 6 plays in a row? I think he scored the first 6 points. Not 6 plays in a row, but they went to him 3 times in a row. Similar to what they did the other day in terms of just like, we're going to feed TKR and we're going to let TKR eat. And he ate once again. He really got going in that standpoint. I thought he was really good today when he was able to kind of face up and attack his man that way instead of a true post. But out of the gate in the second half, that's kind of where he did start to get going there finally. No, I thought he was really good, and I thought he made some really good reads. This is probably his most impactful game rebounding too, because he hasn't had, when he was playing beside Zach and Zach's kind of taking all this attention and space, he was a really aggressive rebounder last year, and I hadn't felt like he'd really had a game like that. And today he finishes with 8 rebounds, against 2 bigs from North Carolina State that are pretty good. They're not great, but they're good, and they're big bodied, and I thought it was an all-around really good game from Trey.
Yeah, I agree. The rebounding has been the thing that stood out for this game. Only 1 in the first half, and then he gets 7 in the second half. Just kind of it just really felt like a flip switch for Purdue in general. TKR rebounding is a big part of that. This was another game where now at the 5, he posted up some, but he also, that short roll where then he, like you said, faces up or gets into a 1-2 dribble kind of drive where it's like this half post up, half drive. I'm just going to bully my way to the rim, but also I have footwork. It was just a really good all around game. And he never, for the most part, really seemed rushed at all. He felt in control. And like you said, like NC State does not have bad bigs by any means. Huntley Hatfield and Middlebrooks. Like, they are both solid players. They're two of NC State's better players, and it just didn't matter to TKR, even on a night that Purdue isn't shooting well, right? And that's where just the respect that Purdue has as shooters of really at minimum 3 on the floor at all times, of just like, hey, we can't really let these guys shoot. It just pays dividends for what TKR is able to do and what he's able to get. I don't know. This almost feels to me like in terms of our discussion of like an Edie last year, in terms of like just simply like, I don't have a lot to say about TKR other than like he did what he's really, really good at. And it's like when we talked about Edie last year, that's a lot of our talking points was he's just really good at what he does.
Yeah, and I thought this was going to be a great free throw night for him too, because every once in a while he struggled on that just a little bit, and he was sitting at 6 of 8, went to the line for 2 more, and those last 2 that he attempted, he ends up missing both of them and shooting basically, I think he shoots 60% from the line. Really, really thought he was going to finish at like 80% today, but still, he's certainly gotten much better there, especially in crunch time. When the game's still in question in terms of his free throw shooting, and as much as he's going to get fouled. I'll tell you the other thing that was really important is they went to a 2 big lineup for a little while. North Carolina State did, and I thought that's really when they started to make their push and make this game close. And again, like TKR, just similar to Zach, TKR put so much foul pressure on him, and maybe that's part of the reason they go to that true post up a little bit more at the start of that second half, and instead of putting him where he's facing and taking him off the dribble, because that true post up, when he's in that situation, it seemed like he drew more fouls against those guys from that than anything else. And we got both of them in a little bit of foul trouble, but especially Middlebrooks. And then they didn't have that 2 big lineup where they were getting in a little bit of a disadvantage, because they were kind of playing bully ball there for about 4 or 5 minutes, and it was being effective.
Yeah, and also with that, shout out Braden Smith for drawing. He drew the 3rd early on Middlebrooks on that.
He was going to get it. He was going to get it no matter what. He was just waiting for him to bite.
Because he passed on an open 3 for it. Like, Smith had an open 3 and just was like, nope, I'm going to pick up his 3rd foul right here. And that's high IQ. Like, that is just knowing personnel and time and all that stuff.
So I was baseline sitting underneath Purdue's basket in the second half, and Braden was maybe 10 feet from us where he's making those moves. And it was just like, got him. Like, he was just waiting.
Yeah, and that was big. I guess sort of on top of it, because that came off of an inverted pick and roll. And what that means is where Braden Smith sets the screen for Trey Kaufman-Renn. In general, it's a guard setting the screen for a big who has the ball. They went to it a few times. It wasn't like they spammed it or anything like that, but they went to it a few times and it was pretty effective. And the thing that really stood out to me with it is that it can be effective as a change of pace, because how many times do we see Braden Smith cutting up through the paints because he's going to go get a handoff from TKR, right? We see that countless times. And then there's a couple times where they just flip it, and Braden Smith, instead of getting the handoff, now he sets that screen, and now TKR is able to kind of work off that. Bigs in general aren't used to having to navigate screens, like defending the ball, and then guards aren't usually in a good spot to be able to help, or if they are, TKR is just going to bully him. So that was the only other thing with TKR I wanted to point out, is I thought there was 3 to 4 times probably, but I think it worked every time. The one where TKR didn't score was because he kicked out to Braden Smith, and then he draws the 3rd on Middlebrooks, like we just talked about. So that was the other thing for TKR. I think the next player we have to talk about is probably Cam Heide, and that's where I want to go. 15 points, 6 of 9 shooting, 3 of 5 from 3, 6 rebounds in 35 minutes. He plays the 2nd most minutes behind Braden Smith. This was Cam Heide's best game of his career, his young career, albeit. And last year he was, didn't have the biggest role, but it really felt like he impacted the game. He brought, I keep going back to energy, but it just really stood out for me in this Purdue game. Heide was a big part of that. He rebounds the ball well, 6 rebounds overall, 4 in the first half. Very, very confident knocking down threes. I think he's above 50% for his career now from 3, on about 57 attempts or something like that. I think he's 29 of 57 if I'm doing my math right. that little 2-3 game stretch, I feel comfortable saying that's kind of behind him to start the season, where he looked lost and like he's figuring out his role. Jakari's looking better. I think it gets hard. This is going away from Purdue specific and more general, I guess, for a second. But like, I think it's really hard given a college schedule is roughly 31. It's 31 regular season games. If you play 3 games, that's 10% of your schedule. That's like a good chunk of your schedule, but at the same time, it's like it isn't always fair to judge an individual player off of just 3 games to start the season, especially somebody like Heide, where he's not figuring out his role, or he was still figuring out his role, how he wanted to play. Now he's starting to break through and knocking down threes, drove the ball a bit, caught at least one lob in transition, maybe 2. He caught one, and then Brain Smith
they threw another one
at the shot clock, and Heide almost got it still.
That thing was like throwing 90 miles an hour too. That ball was coming right at us where we were sitting, and like, I mean, a few Purdue personnel like just immediately ducked like right away. That ball was a rocket. So a little bit too much heat on that for even Cam to catch it. But I think it probably is his best game of his career. But I mean, shooting the ball at such a high level, and you were talking about those first 3 games too. I think it's really hard with a guy like Cam as well, because he's predominantly reliant on somebody else getting him the ball, right? So he's never really has the situation to just initiate or create for himself. So it's not just about him, but maybe, what defense was given, what Braden was reading, how the kickouts are coming, all that sort of stuff. So never want to judge on 3 games, but I think it's even harder for somebody like him that's relying on somebody else to get him the ball. But, he shot the ball so well, and I asked Painter about this in, interviews after the game, but they actually ran action for him, right? To come around and get a dribble handoff and shoot that 3 at the top of the key that he drills, which really felt like, to me, kind of, it's early still, right? But it felt like a little bit of a nail in a coffin at that point in terms of where that game was going to go. And you just don't see that a lot. Like, I don't know that Purdue's ever run a specific action for him. Painter's answer was really good. He said there were certain ways teams play defense where they can do that for him, and other times where they can't. So listen to that when you get to the post-game interview. The other thing as well, if Purdue's going to play this small ball and have all this spacing, it's really important. And we talked about this in the Marshall post-game show, that like I felt like we saw more of those 45 cuts than we'd seen all year. And he gets, I think, 2 today where he makes a cut off of a read. His guy's overplaying him and gets behind his guy, and like TKR hits him one time for that dunk. And if you're going to have all that spacing and be open, him and Miles, especially as wings, got to read that situation and make those cuts. And then that's when you can really capitalize off of that extra space, in my mind.
Yeah, no, for sure. And as like right now, if a defense is looking at Heide, they are going to try to take away the 3-pointer. Like, he is too good of a shooter, and he's not like a super good on-ball creator yet, where you're going to try to run him off the line. You can cut well. I think he had 1 drive. I don't think he made the layup, but he
missed it. He missed it badly. Like, it was up above the box. It did not end well.
But it was at least the first time all year that we've seen him just attack a closeout and drive. Maybe not first time, but one of the few times. And so it's one of those that, like, and this was honestly a theme in Purdue's first half. It was like, hey, they're actually getting to the rim well. Hey, nobody can finish at the rim. Like,
right.
I think they were 6 of 16 in the first half at the rim, and they took what? In the first half, Purdue had 28 shots, 16 of them were at the rim, and they couldn't convert. And then second half, they go 10 of 14. I had to do quick math. 10 of 14 in the second half at the rim.
Yeah, and I mean, if Purdue just hits some of those bunnies, this is a 20-point win today. Like, I mean, Caleb misses a few, Jakari misses a few, Fletch missed a wide open layup at one point in there. Like, that never happens. But this easily could have been a 20-point win today if they just convert some of those. I don't want to call them gimmies, but shots 3 feet from the rim and in.
Yep. I want to go to Jakari next. I think
let's do it.
Just the second half specifically that he ends up in the game, 8 points on 3 of 7 shooting, 4 rebounds, 3 assists, no turnovers, a block, and a steal. That second half is what I envisioned more of for Jakari this year, where he's this secondary ball handler that can attack downhill. He can facilitate for others. He can be physical rebounding. Like, I'm not expecting him to grab 4 boards every single game by any means, but can get in there and fight. Also, I thought he was really good defensively. The 3-point shot, like I said, it just has to start falling at some point. As simple as that. But man, like if Jakari plays like this, it is a very good problem, because on the games where Colvin and Jakari are both playing well, and Colvin had, I don't think Colvin scored much. Yeah, he was at 1 of 4, but he had some good stuff defensively and with energy.
Mm-hmm.
You have to kind of just pick who you want, and that's a good option to have, where you have this optionality actually of, hey, I can go a little bit smaller with Harris. He gives a little bit more off the bounce. Hey, I can go Colvin, get a little bit more length, get a little bit more shooting. Purdue's going to need both of them at times. You can throw CJ Cox in that mix, although he's definitely third out of that group as of right now in terms of minutes. But yeah, I was really, really impressed with the energy and the ability that Jakari had to get downhill, help break the press too. I know there's been some comments about that, of break the press, turn it into easy offense. They did that 2, 3, 4 times. And Jakari was a big part of that, he's filling the Lance Jones role. Like, that's what he has to do this year. Maybe not fully to what Lance did, but parts of what Lance did.
And I think this was a little bit of a grow-up game for Jakari in terms of just doing things at a level of comfort and ease and fluidity that maybe we haven't seen him do yet against a team that wants to apply some pressure, whether that's actually setting up a press or just in their half court, how they want to pressure the perimeter defense. But there was, I'll tell you the play that stood out to me the most, and it was really early in the game when he first came in, actually, that I thought was just showed how much he's maturing already in 7 games on the floor as a floor general. It got really late in the shot clock, and I don't remember I think Braden was on the bench at this point. I think that's when he was getting a rest, and I think it got under 10 on the shot clock and started counting down, and he makes a move, drives, and finds first. After out of a pick and roll, he finds first, and first gets a 2, but never look rattled, never look panicked in that situation, even though the shot clock was going down, and then makes the right read, makes a great pass to Caleb, and Caleb finishes. And I think that single play to me just speaks to where he's at right now in terms of his development. The other thing that I really liked, we talked about him just getting into the paint a little bit more right now, but I always you haven't been a fan quite as long, Joe, right? I've just been around on this earth longer. And one of the things that you would have heard Purdue fans say for decades and decades was attack the press. Like when Purdue would beat the press a lot of times, then they would just pull it out and sit, right? And like, once you beat the press, you've got an advantage. And that play where Jakari attacks it, right? He gets the ball, gets across half court, attacks it, and hits, who did he hit on that pass? Was it Cam?
That sounds right, but Chad can correct us if we're wrong.
I don't remember. No, it was Cam. He finds Cam cutting to the rim after he attacks the press once they break it. So I love to see that, man. I love, like, because once you beat it, you've got the offense advantage, and that's how you get them out of press. You take advantage of having that, right, and get an easy basket.
Yeah. I don't got much more to add to that, because it was good. And it was good to see that they were able to do it. They're going to be
now he still got behind a little bit, right, on defense a couple of times, and just lost a guy here or there on a couple of baseline out of bounds. So it wasn't like a perfect game yet, right? But he's a freshman in his 7th game, and you're just seeing a ton of growth there. And he still was good defensively. One of those times he got beat on the baseline out of bounds, he recovers and still blocks the shot somehow. Yeah. Oh, I know the other thing I was going to say about him. I've been surprised about how good his body control is. Like, when he does attack on some of these layups, one, he's got more hang time than I thought he would, but he really contorted his body to get that shot kind of like up and over the front of the rim after he took contact for that 1-and-1. He's just, I don't know, there's something about him that, I don't know, maybe it's that he looks a little rigid. But in these attack situations, he's just been way more athletic and fluid, and I guess just ingenious around the rim and how he can finish.
I wonder if that's just him, like, at that point, getting more, I don't want to say flow states, because I don't think that's the right word to describe, but just playing freer in those moments where I wonder if there's still some, as you get into this tough Purdue system to learn, he's thinking, and then on the drives, it's like, hey, let's just hoop. Like, I'm just going to go make a play, and where some of that instinct kicks in, and it allows him to be a little bit more fluid because he is a good athlete. He is. He's not Heide or Colvin, going to jump out the gym, but he is a very good athlete, and that's Purdue is going to need that at times from him. Did you have anything else on Jakari?
No, he was my biggest paragraph today. So like taking notes, I thought there was just a ton of little things that he did really well today.
And that's, I mean, when I watched when I watched his high school film and I was like, oh, this dude's going to play big minutes for Purdue. The thing that stood out was this guy does every little thing right. Like, that was my biggest takeaway. I don't think there are more talented freshmen, Dylan Harper, obviously, and players like that in this Big Ten class, but there wasn't one that stood out that did every little thing right. And Jakari was one of the guys that did that. So starting to see that come through, going to need it to continue going forward. Brief side note, because KenPom refreshed after this game, TKR is now 8th in KenPom MVP.
Oh, wow.
Now, Janai Broom from Auburn has a gigantic gap over number 2. He has a Zach Edey size gap over number 2, but it is still cool to see TKR in that top 10 right now.
I don't want to hear Janai's name until like the day before we play him when we have to do the preview show, because I watched the game yesterday and I'm already having nightmares. So let's not mention his name until then again.
All right, let's worry about Purdue. They just beat NC State right now. BYU is up 5 against Ole Miss with 4 minutes left in the first half. Catchings is 4 of 5 from 3, leads the way for BYU. I think the 3 players we talked about, TKR, Camden, and Jakari, were the big 3 to talk about in this game. I guess
I got a guy. I got a guy.
Oh, I know where you're going.
You do? If I'm wrong, you got to tell me that you were wrong.
Okay, I will.
One of the things that I said in our preview show over the summer was that you were going to hear Miles called an effort guy this year. And there was like 3 or 4 different plays where I was just like, man, that's an effort play. Whether it was a rebound or a defense or digging down, for a loose ball or something like that. And his arc in terms of the narrative around him and everything has just changed so dramatically from early in the season last year to now, where you were talking about bringing that energy in that second half. I thought he was a huge piece of that, just in the way that he was fighting, the way that he was defending. Again, not perfect defense, but he was really, really good defensively today. I just want to give him his flowers and his kudos for becoming that guy and through his growth and development and just change in leadership to become that high energy effort guy for this team. Now really 2 or 3 different games where it's just really, really stood out for me.
That is where I knew you were going to Colvin, and it's a good shout out because I agree. He was a guy that brought energy. The shot didn't fall, 1 of 4 overall, 0 of 2 from 3, but like, imagine last year saying, man, Colvin didn't shoot the ball well, but he played well. Like,
right?
It felt like those 2 were so intertwined. And he's struggling from 3. He's 9 of 23, which is 39%. It's like, it's not like he's shooting poorly from 3 either. Obviously a bad game, but that is what it is. Bad game shooting the ball, I should say. But yeah, no, you were spot on that. Like, in the off season where you're like, hey, he's going to be a effort. He's going to be a hustle guy. It's really starting to come through. And in that small ball lineup where, today he's the 5th option offensively, given how Camden was playing. Like, that means maybe knock down an open 3 and play good defense. And a 3 didn't fall. Oh, well, he played good defense, which is why he still ends up playing, 22 minutes in this game. And he would have played more, except Jakari played really, really well in that second half.
Right. And he got 5 rebounds. So if it's a discussion of is Jakari on the floor, is Miles on the floor, between those 2 guys today, they had 9 rebounds between the pair of them. And that's on that small ball. They're going to have to rebound by committee. Guards and wings are going to have to attack in terms of getting to the rim. They're going to have to get bodies on them. Now, you and I talked about in the pregame show that North Carolina State is not a good rebounding team necessarily on the year, even though they have those 2 bigs, but then the rest of the team does not rebound great. So have to see it and have to continue to do it against other teams. But today was a great showing from that regard. I thought his take to the rim was a good take too. He gets partially blocked and still almost makes it, but the finish wasn't there. But he's just in little pieces, right? He's getting more and more comfortable doing that. And I think by the time we roll into January and February, we're going to see more of it. And I think it's something that's going to be needed.
Yeah, I'm with you. And it's like it is slowly improving. It's interesting that it feels like he should be able to finish a little bit better at the rim on those drives, but also very small sample size. Like he'll get there eventually. It's still going to take some time for him to be able to do it. And potentially developing a 1-2 dribble pull up too, or getting back to that more could also be an answer in the meantime. Let's jump to. Do you want to jump to Braden or Fletch?
I think we can. Yeah, let's talk about both of them actually. Because I thought there was. I don't know. Go ahead.
Like they didn't stand out good or bad to me in this game. Like Braden still did his thing, 6 assists. I'll throw up the stats right now for everybody to be able to look at. Did his thing, 6 assists. I think he had 2 turnovers. Yeah, 6 assists, 2 turnovers. Doesn't shoot the ball well, but gets 11 points. Gets to the line a few times. 6 for 6 there. Lawyer doesn't shoot the ball great, but again, he's another guy that gets to the line, adds 5 rebounds and an assist. I don't think they got burned too much defensively. Like, I don't know. If you have something more insightful, then definitely take it away, because I truthfully just don't have much insight on either of them this game.
Are you worried at all yet about Braden's shooting?
I was going to ask you that.
Well, I beat you to it. It's been, a few games in a row now, and it's kind of like, well, like he's still controlling the game, right? He's still the puppet master that's leading all of this. He's doing so many other things well. Which, by the way, that one pass to TKR where he manipulates and draws the 2 guys, and I mean, he goes into that fadeaway shot motion, like doesn't jump pass. He truly goes into that fadeaway shot motion and then waits for us, hangs for a half second, and then just rifles a bullet to TKR because both guys left him. That was a thing of beauty. But anyway, are you worried yet?
A little bit, but I think what I've come to kind of realize is, like, I don't think we should expect the shooting numbers from last season, just given that his shot diet is straight up tougher this year. Like, if he shot what he shot this year, or shot what he shot last year on this year's shot diet, that would be pretty wild, to be honest. But there is some concern of, like, hey, what like, is it just simply fatigue? Is it tougher shots? Like, he's getting more pull-ups. He's not getting to the rim probably as much. He is drawing more fouls. He's increased his free throw rate by 10% compared to last year. And so it's like, it's not like oh man, Braden Smith can't score, but it's like hey, what's going on here? Like, is this just a little slump that we see from players at random points, or is this a sign of thing to come? But then on the flip side, like, I understand it's been 7 games, and 3 of them are bye games or whatever. He is number 1 in the country in assist rate, like just number 1 in the country on assist rate. 40. When he is on the floor, he is assisting on 47% of Purdue makes, and then he's also, how many shots is he making? Right, he's probably either assisting or scoring on 65-70% of Purdue buckets, and a lot of the other ones are TKR post ups. So, while also decreasing his turnover rate. Like, his turnovers have decreased this year so far,
to go get another pair,
while assisting more. So that part has just been crazy impressive. I'm not like, hey, Braden Smith can't shoot the ball at this point, but it is a concern. And the only way that, if this is specifically the 2-point percentage, he's shooting 35% from 3 on the year. He's shooting 38% from 2. That might just be how it goes this year, where we see a little bit more variance with naturally how his shots are taken, but it's something I'm monitoring. That's for sure.
Yeah, I would not say I'm worried yet. It's definitely something keeping an eye on, a little bit of a red flag, but I guess also, the games where he really needs to be, high scoring output, is going to be in those games where they're, in drop coverage and just basically giving Braden that mid range. And I don't think he's had a bad shooting night on one of those games yet necessarily. So I guess if those two things collide and they're going to play a specific type of defense where they try to deny and then they play drop and like Braden needs to go out and score 30 some, like essentially like what Creighton was doing to us, then I'll get more concerned.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And that's where we're at right now. It's just a little bit of wait and see. I'm trying to see. Yeah, shots, like just looking at his shot profile, he's getting in the paint a little bit more than last year, which is good. Just got to start seeing him fall. And then that's as simple as that. Anybody else stand out? I know this wasn't a deep rotation. We can look at the rotation chart. I'll pull it up here. For anybody that is watching, thank you. Appreciate you tuning in, especially on Thanksgiving, or if you're watching after, still appreciate that. Make sure you like, subscribe. Like I said, it just really does help us out. We appreciate you guys tuning in, spending holiday time, allowing you guys watching allows Craig to be able to go to San Diego to cover this. So really do appreciate it. But looking at the rotation chart, if you're watching on YouTube, color box means that's what that player played for that time period. It's correlated by position at the bottom. This was not a deep rotation today. CJ Cox plays 7 minutes. Burgess plays 2. Besides that, it's basically a 7-man rotation. Does anything stand out from really we've talked about the starting 5 and Harris. So I guess first CJ, Burgess. Anything you want to just throw out about any of them?
Well, we really didn't talk about Lawyer much yet, but
true.
I mean, not that we need to talk about him a ton, but I do think he struggled a little bit against their athleticism when he was attacking. There were a couple of shots that just were a little bit out of control when he was driving. And then I look up and I'm like, oh, he's whatever it was then. It was at the end of the first half and he had like 7 points, I think, at the end of the first half, maybe 8 points. And some of those were coming from the free throw line, right? I think he gets to the free throw line for 6 shots. So he's using, I guess, their aggressiveness and athleticism against him to try to draw some contact and get to the rim. So I mean, still somewhat effective, but I thought they did bother him a little bit, which is how they want to defend on the perimeter today. It's really nice that we've seen Miles and in this game specifically Cam start to emerge a little bit more, and even Jakari when he's in a sub being able to attack so that you have other options in those situations. But in terms of everybody else, I guess the one thing that I'll kind of mention, I've seen a couple of people in the chat saying, were you surprised that Berg didn't get any minutes at all today? And I think now that Painter has kind of said, like, we're going to go all in on the small ball thing. If you're going to do that, and every single season this happens, right? He starts playing 10 guys, maybe 11 guys, some minutes. And then you start to see that rotation get whittled down a little bit as we get towards December and get whittled down a little bit more as we get a little bit further in the season. And I think if he's decided, which it looks like they have, that they're going to go all in on the small ball thing, you want to get those guys as much minutes as possible right now together. So when they hit the heart of their Big Ten season and everything else, that they've developed that as well as they possibly can. So I really think it's just a matter of like, this is what we're going to do. Will's not a bad player. Will can do certain things well. Still may need him in certain matchups for sure later on down the road. But I think Painter wants to get this core because, again, like we saw it in this game too, even when TKR went out first, everybody's coming in from halftime right now, Joe. So it might get a little loud in the background here. They still had a small 4 with first in for several minutes today as well. I just think that's where he wants to see it go.
Yeah, I'm with you. I can talk for a second if you need me to. I think I'm not mad that Painter tried with Berg for as long as he did into the season. I know there was a lot of right away Berg shouldn't play. I am fine with Berg getting run and getting minutes, especially early in the season, because you didn't know what Berg was truly outside of garbage time minutes. I think he's probably not at the level that Purdue fans, where Painter was hoping. And so now you're starting to see where it's like, hey, why not just maximize what we have? If Heide's playing as well as he has or did today, Colvin has had his moments. Jakari's now having a little bit of a breakout. Like, the way you get your 5 best players on the floor is TKR at the 5. And that's going to result in Berg less minutes. And then on top of that, First has been better than Berg. And I think if you go through a lot of interviews from Painter, even in this season so far, he's said a few times, like usually in reference to playing 4 bigs at one point or rotating 4 bigs in, he's just like, you just kind of let him play and you're hoping that somebody emerges. And I think we're starting to finally see that with First as the backup and TKR at the starting at the 5. And that just kind of cuts minutes for Berg. You still want to get Burgess a few minutes. Just we've harped on it of like, hey, right now, yeah, Burgess isn't. You don't want to rely on Burgess within your every game rotation, but at the same time, there might be a random game that he pops off, or more realistically, by February, he might be a guy that can be a 10-minute a game guy that you do need just for size and maybe some rim protection, stretch the floor. And that just all lumps Berg out. Now, I agree. There's going to be matchups like Michigan plays 2 bigs, IU plays 2 bigs, Maryland plays 2 bigs, where maybe that size just really does come into play and they need spot minutes for that. But this was the first game TKR at the 5 really, really excelled. I think First has emerged as the backup big. It's hard. It's hard to find minutes elsewhere. And that's kind of my take on Berg. Are you good to talk at this point?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay. Did you have anything else?
I guess the last thing I was going to say was, in that stretch where their bigs were kind of dominating in the paint for 3 or 4 minutes. And then when we start the second half, they go to TKR purposefully, try to get those guys in foul trouble. And then, Braden gets it. If that flips and goes the other way some game, right, where we see TKR go to the bench and has to be there for significant minutes, when Cam needs to come off the floor for a break and Painter's going to go 2 big lineup, then you still may see a Berg First or a Berg Burgess type of lineup in there somewhere as well. So I don't think we saw the last of him by any means. I just think that it's going to be down quite a bit. Outside of that, with CJ and with Burgess and who was the other one?
First.
Yeah. Okay.
First is there's a little bit
I think,
more, but
yeah, I was just gonna say, like, I think this is another game where it's like, man, if he can just get that feel back. It didn't seem like him and Braden and him and Fletch at one time were just on the same page in pick and roll. There was a couple times it didn't look like he realized the pass was going to come to him or mishandled it. And then there was a couple of blown layups again, sort of thing. But I still think it's going to be there at some point this year, Joe. I really do. I think he's going to get back in the flow of things good enough because he's getting looks. Like, he's doing really good things to get looks. He's just got to finish them. And I mean, non-conference time is the time to work on that and try to get that feel back for him. But I'm still a believer that when we do need to play 2 bigs, that First and TKR beside each other is the best option we have.
I agree. And it keeps the athleticism that this lineup can have, which is it's a rare thing to say, not rare, but more uncommon thing to say about a Purdue team of like, hey, keep the athleticism, because there is a lot of it. First is trending in the right direction. It is still a little, it's like his misses are really loud, if that makes sense. Like, his misses really stand out of like, man, like just a little bit better, a little bit stronger. And it turns into, it can turn into like, hey, First has played good in 10 minutes to, or what he played, 14 today, something like that. 14 minutes to like, hey, why isn't First getting more minutes? If just some of those shots can fall. Last year he was 47 or 48% from 2. Small sample size this year, but he's up to 53% from 2. So like, it is trending. His first 2 seasons, he was 64 and 61%. So like, it's still not quite back to where it was. It is at least trending that way. 15 to 21 from the free throw line.
I was going to say that's gotten a lot better.
Yeah. So the upside is there. Jason Pugh said, did First make all his free throws today? And
he was 1 of 2 today. He was 1 of 2.
1 of 2. And 1 of 4 from the field. So it's like, that's where it's just like, if he makes a couple, even just 1 or 2 more of those kind of layups, I think we're talking about his game a lot differently. Defense, I think, was what it was for First. It's good overall. maybe giving up a little bit of rim protection, but he moves well. I don't have much more. And then CJ and Burgess, yeah, just kind of getting the minutes. CJ feels like the one where it's like he's going to still have games where he plays a bunch of minutes because he either gets hot or Purdue just needs his ball handling. But in games where he's going to be third, he's going to have the third crack at it. If Colvin plays well or if Jakari plays well, they're just going to get more minutes.
Yeah, I'm 100% with you. And I thought CJ did some good things defensively in the 7 minutes that he was in there. Never really even got a chance to get a look at a shot to get started going, I guess. And Jakari was more active today, getting downhill. And even though he misses both of them, taking 2 wide open threes, but just was a lot more active. So I thought that was the play. And then, like we said, for the most part, other than a couple of baseline out of bounds plays, Jakari was really good defensively as well. So, but more importantly, the ball handling, the getting downhill, all that sort of stuff. So CJ just wasn't going to get more minutes at that point necessarily. But I don't really have anything else on the players in general. If you want to go, I do want to watch the second half. So when we do the preview show, I can actually know a little bit about what I'm talking about, if possible. So do you want to go to the starred comments or did you have something else still?
No, that's really it for me. We'll go to the star comments. Jason Depew, this is going to sound funny, but I like to think TKR's offense moves sometimes remind me of Kung Fu Panda a little. Unorthodox, but always seem to work out. That's about as a creative a comparison as you can come up with. So respect to that. And like when I read it, that checks out.
Yeah. We just had to read it. We had to read that on air because that is, not every day there's a comparison to a cartoon character.
Yeah, and especially one that it just it makes sense to me. I can buy it. From Tom White, Heidi had a great game today. Glad to see Jason Depew also showing support or showing love to them. Jakari, Cam, Miles, all solid support roles today. Caleb as well. Agreed. I want to say anybody played bad for Purdue today from an individual standpoint. Obviously, some excelled more than others, but I don't think anybody played bad. Jeff Parks, Boilers were good on the boards and took care of the ball. A good recipe for victory. I mean, yeah, that's going to be one of the key. That's always the keys for Purdue. Also from Jeff Parks, season 3-point percentage, Fletch 61.9%, Cam 61.5%. I can see both at or close to 50% for the season. I think Lawyer's a little lower. Lower is 58.3%. So still very right in that ballpark. Do you see either of them shooting over 50% for the season from 3?
I mean, no. Like that's a hard mark. I mean, I could see it, but I think there's a greater chance that just over time, as you spread out the data in terms of total number of shots on the year, that they're both going to end up. I could see them both ending up around 45%.
Yeah. I think, and that reminds me of a point for Fletch. Like, his usage, has it gone down? Oh, no, that's a lie. It's gone down from his freshman year, and it's shot up just a touch from last year. He's facilitating a little bit more, which helps that. But my point was going to be, it feels like Fletch is more a defined role of that true third option, and he doesn't always have to force, which I think helps the 3-point percentage a bit too. There's going to be games where he might have to, and those in theory could tank it a bit. Cam's going to knock down open shots. That's just what he's going to do. Started the season 0 for 2, and then he's been 11 of 16 from 3 sets. That's impressive. Michael
seems good.
Yeah, Michael Gordon. We are giving up too many points in the paint. Do we have an answer? I'm concerned about any opponent with a decent 4-5. I think they gave up 30 today. 30 points in the paint, which is about 50% of NC State's points. Also, you factor in 11 free throws from NC State. You presume a decent bit of those are coming in the paint or coming from shots in the paint. I think the defense just has to be fine. I don't think the defense has to be elite. I think the defense has to be fine. And in theory, first can give you fine in terms of rim protection, maybe even good. If the perimeter pressure, like there was some today, is there, then that alleviates a little bit of TKR having to protect the rim, which can make it fine. And that's really where I think it needs to get to, is that level. But it's going to be a concern. I will say for NC State specifically, they're a team that doesn't shoot threes well, and they don't shoot a lot of them in general. They want to drive, they post up. So that does skew for this specific game the stats a bit, but I do agree with the overall sentiment. Like, it is a concern defensively.
Yeah, and I mean, even with that, that we gave up 30, we had 34, so we were +4 in the paint. I think to me, like at the end of the day, if we're net positive in terms of points in the paint, then it's fine. I it was hard for me to see where I was at, like because of the basketball stanchion. I couldn't even see one corner of our end a lot of the time, so it was a little bit hard for me to tell exactly what was going on all the time. But I didn't really feel like their guards just individually were abusing us defensively in terms of getting into the paint, like Phylon did from Alabama or some other games, even against like who did we play in the first game? Texas A&M, Corpus Christi. Like some of their guards were just kind of showing that shake and bake and getting by our guys into the paint a little bit too. And I thought today was a lot better personally.
I agree. I think it was Purdue's best defensive game of the year, ? Probably.
In my notes, I put best defensive half of the year, the second half. I feel pretty confident just because of the level of competition it is too. I feel pretty confident in that.
Yep. Last one, and then good transition to get us out of here. Lynn Ream says, when do we play again? That is 6:00 Eastern time tomorrow against the winner of BYU Ole Miss, which second half is right about to start. BYU up 42-39. So we will be live after that game tomorrow. 6:00 Eastern time tip. I believe it is on Fox, not FS1, but I believe it is on Fox. So we will be back tomorrow for the post-game show for that. Appreciate everybody tuning in, especially on Thanksgiving and just being able to, show support and all that. So we do really appreciate it. Make sure to hit the like and subscribe button on the way out. Turn on the bell notifications, and then you'll get notified as soon as we do go live tomorrow. Presumably, Craig will get some more pressers or random hallway questions, if we're calling them that this time. And then we will be going live once again, win or lose. So appreciate everybody tuning in, and we will catch you all tomorrow.